Well, this is my first video of 2022, and I sit down to record for the first time in what feels like forever and realize that I didn't take the garland off of my mirror in the background. Does it feel too Christmassy? Can we keep it? Do we want it gone? Let me know in the comments. For the last few years, I've made a video similar to this where I talk about habits to adopt if you want to live a more sustainable lifestyle in the new year, because I know a lot of us make New Year's goals around this time of the year. And if you're into sustainability, it's probably part of your goals. In the past, I've done like 20, 30, I don't even know how many goals in one video, but in this video, I want to do 7 that are really hard-hitting goals to drive change in the world, apart from just like habits to build in your everyday life. So I guess in a lot of ways these are advanced goals, but I think almost anyone can do them that's into sustainability, and I think if you want to consider yourself an environmental activist, these are going to be really helpful for you. My theme for the year of 2022 is to diversify, and so to talk more about things that are not just the same things I've been talking about, not super beginner or intermediate level. So let's diversify the things we put out a little bit and talk more about advanced tips, I guess. Let's go. This is something I do on a very regular basis. I've talked about a little bit here on the channel, but I really want to drive this point home that keeping a list of people, businesses, politicians to write to can be really, really impactful. I've realized there's a lot of chat out there between myself and other people on the internet, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, everywhere. People talk a lot about things that bother them, about things they'd rather see, about changes they'd like to make in the world. But I really think that we should stop doing this and maybe do more of this. And maybe a little bit of this. What I mean is, instead of complaining about a business and their environmental practices or their packaging or their lack of transparency or some shitty bill your governor passed, don't just sit there and yap, yap, yap on social media or to your friends. Take action and actually write to those people, call those people, email those people. And I know it may seem like you're just another voice in the wind and you're not going to make a big difference, but if you don't say anything, you definitely aren't going to make any difference at all. And over the years, I've kept a running list for myself, and I've actually seen changes happen because of the messages and emails I have sent. And every time one of those things actually changes and works out, I keep a little running list of personal accomplishments, and I would absolutely love if more of you were able to do that as well, because that's how we see change actually happen. And if you're new to this, you may also be thinking, well, what the heck do I even need to talk to people about, Shelby? Who am I writing and what am I writing about and literally why? As you start to live a more conscious life, you'll realize the things that need to change. When you start realizing how much plastic waste impacts the environment, when you start realizing how difficult it is to take public transit in your area, when you realize your neighbors are putting their Christmas trees in the landfill. All sorts of different scenarios where you could write someone or email someone or even like post on Twitter and at them in your Instagram story, all those sort of things. These are all forms of activism instead of just doing a lot of this. And sometimes calling and doing a lot of this to the people who can actually change that thing is also a good option. But keeping this running list, I beg of you, do more of that in your everyday life. And even if you just take 10 minutes once a month to do all of the things on your list, it's gonna make you feel a little bit better, especially with things like eco-anxiety or guilt around any of the things that you don't have control over. It is indeed a habit that just might change the world. I have to acknowledge this habit or action or whatever you want to call it is very difficult for me because I'm an introvert. And when I say I'm an introvert, you guys, I'm realizing more and more as I progress closer to my 30s, which is crazy. I'm not turning 30, I'm turning 29, but everyone makes me feel like they're the same. But as I grow and as I realize things about myself, I'm like an introverted person, as in like there can be a chance of someone interrupting me or I just don't feel at peace. All that to say, I'm a very introverted person, and so doing things like finding and building community are very difficult for me. But it's something that when I do it, it makes me feel very fulfilled and powerful. There is so much power in community, which the word is unity. And in the US specifically, also as I've gotten older and learned more about different cultures and really just seen how we've all, as different countries and parts of the world, handled the pandemic, you realize how individualistic individualistic US society really is. And it's not good for driving change. But it's also just important for changing people's perspectives and minds. When you relate to more people and you see different people's lifestyles and different people's perspectives, when you come together to help as one, it definitely creates more of a let's work together mentality, and let's care about things like climate change because they impact everybody mentality, rather than the individualistic, well, I'll just adapt this way and I'll just continue making more and more money this way, and I don't care about how my actions impact those people over there. That's kind of what I mean when I say that community is so important, because caring about your neighbors and not doing things that are going to impact them in a negative way, you only care about that when there is a sense of community, which again, like I say, really, really lacks in US culture specifically. And there are so many different ways to find and build community, and obviously I have a really good one here in my neighborhood with my neighbors. Most of them, not all, but most of them are pretty great. And they've specifically taught me a lot about how important community is. Last year, which is so crazy that it hasn't even been a year since the winter freeze here in Texas, if you were aware of all of the things happening with that. That experience really taught me why community is so important, from the person whose hot water heater had gas and so they could come take a hot shower, or the person who had a fire so that we could go get warm over there, or the person who still had electricity so we could go charge our devices. When we all work together, then we care a lot more about the things that are impacting each other. But aside from just your neighbors, there are so many different ways to find community. My No Buy group has been amazing. I actually realized how important that was also during the winter freeze, when people didn't have food and they couldn't find it because our grocery stores were literally empty. People were asking for food to feed their children. I was able to give some of the excess food that we had to people so that they weren't hungry. But in general, your No Buy group can get super specific. Like, I think there are 7 or so in the city of San Antonio in general. So the people in that group are really close to where you are and can quite literally build a sense of community. Community gardens is also a place where I found a lot of community when we were a part of one when we were in Austin. So you could check that out. Workshops at your local library are also really cool. And just in general, if you have the ability to do this, if your library hosts workshops, like literally from the most basic things like what the hell credit cards are, like how to utilize them, some public libraries offer free workshops on that. And you notice people who are regulars at the library, after a period of time, they build their own community. You can host a cleanup in your neighborhood, which is a great way to start community. If you don't have the Nextdoor app, it's a really good way also to like find your neighbors, host the cleanup, and create community. Volunteering is also a great way to create community. People who are regular volunteers at different nonprofits, they create their own like friend groups, potlucks, all that sort of stuff. It's a great way to find community, as well as attending different activist group meetings. So different chapters of the Sunrise Movement would be a great way to find community, as well as your local citizens climate lobby. And a side note, when it comes to community, aside from doing things like activism and driving change and all that sort of stuff, and caring about your neighbors and changing perspectives, those are all very important to me personally. But I also realize that when I'm friends with my neighbors, it really helps with things not so selfless. So when I need to borrow a pot because I don't have one that's big enough to cook for all the people I'm gonna have over, but I will likely never need that pot again, borrow it from my neighbor. When our asshole neighbor 2 doors down blows all the leaves into the cul-de-sac, my neighbor decides to rake them so his kids can play in the cul-de-sac, but he runs out of room in his compost bin. Put your leaves in our compost bin. And because we have a community here, when one of us needs something, the other one can help out. That inevitably helps with sustainable practices, because borrowing is obviously more sustainable than buying something that you'll only use once. So for reasons like that, in terms of sustainability, community is really important. I recently heard this phrase in this book that I'm listening to called, I believe it's called Disrupt Her. And the author has a whole chapter on how you can practice addition by subtraction, aka don't be a consumer, which is kind of what my channel is founded on. But shifting your mindset into thinking that being wealthy or being successful or adding to your life has to be through adding things, switching that mindset to practicing addition by subtraction. So decluttering in and of itself is a great way to practice addition by subtraction, because you may not realize it until you do a declutter, but things really do weigh us down. I didn't really declutter my garage, I more just organized it recently, but the way it feels walking into there now is so much lighter than it felt before. So in general, addition by subtraction is not buying new things all the time, which is going to be obviously better for the planet, but it is a habit and mindset shift that really, once you get it, you get it. Does that make sense?
The girls that get it? get it. The girls that don't.
This can also apply in things that you're giving your energy to. Practice gaining additional energy by subtracting the things that you are currently giving your energy to. So if you're worrying about things that have to do with climate change or plastic pollution or anything to do with the environment in general, practicing addition by subtraction in that way would be to start worrying about things that you can control, add that, but subtract worrying about the things that you can't control. And I talk about this a lot, but the habit of bringing less stuff into your life and the habit of not thinking of success or happiness as getting more things, that habit is definitely good for sustainable living and just for like better mental health overall. Questioning everything may sound daunting, but this is what I call a conscious life. At least for me, I'd love to hear if this is a situation for you, but the way that I grew up was the typical American dream, I guess you would say.
Best country in the world.
To upgrade your car every couple years, to buy clothes without thinking about it, to buy unlimited amount of things without thinking about it, to act and do certain things because that's the status quo and that is normal. And if you don't question everything, if you don't live a conscious life, then you will fall into that path of doing all of the things just because of the way that they are done. And so getting in the habit of always asking why will lead you to a conscious life, because the more you question things that we do and buy and say and think, the more you realize it's really not the most beneficial way to live and definitely not the most sustainable way to live. I am notorious in my family for constantly asking why, but I think it's really important. If you don't question things, things never change. And if you think about it, living sustainably, at least in terms of the standard American lifestyle right now, living sustainably is kind of in opposition to that. And so we're really not following the status quo in many ways, and getting into the habit of always questioning things, always asking why, and living a conscious life is how we get to a more sustainable future. Along with asking why about everything, the habit of staying informed is really powerful. I know I said earlier we need to do a little bit less of this, but inevitably when you are a part of a community, you're going to be doing this. And obviously with our families and all those sort of things, we do a lot of talking. And I think being well informed in your opinions and your stances as an environmentalist is really, really important. And staying informed on what legislation is going on in your local, like your city, your state, nationally, and globally. I know it sounds like a lot, but staying informed is a habit that you really, really should develop. Now, don't get me wrong, there are many days where I go without reading the newest news and all that sort of stuff. But staying up to date on what's going on is going to make us inevitably better environmentalists, change our lifestyles according to what we want the world to look like in terms of sustainability, and do more of this productively. Talk to people about changes that we need productively. I know you've heard the 3Rs so many times, but I feel like I need to drill it into everyone's mind every single time I talk about it, that it needs to be utilized in that order. The more I'm around people and the more I get introduced as the environmentalist in the group, everyone responds with, "Oh yeah, I recycle." And I don't want to be the person every time someone says that to me that has to be like, okay and, but low key in my head I'm like, okay and. It seems that at some point in everybody's life they forget about the reduce and reuse and they just recycle. That's the answer to everything. All of the environmental crises that we face, we just recycle and it's fine. To me, reduce really, really engulfs most of what I talk about here on this channel. To reduce the things we buy, to reduce the things we need, to reduce the emissions we make, to reduce all of the things that we can to have a smaller footprint on the environment. But I think we really need to get more into preaching those 3 Rs and how the things that we do in our everyday life relate to each of those Rs. Because if the 3 Rs were more common, I wouldn't constantly have to think in my head,
recycling really isn't that great. I don't want to hear about how that's the only thing you do for the environment, because now I'm sad.
I've gotten really good at filtering myself to not be that person as an environmentalist in the group. Let me know if you have any coping mechanisms for that as well. But with everything in our lives, it should be a habit as environmentalists to not only practice, but also kind of to preach the 3 Rs and utilizing them in that order. This is going to sound counterintuitive, but I find that actually giving yourself a break and a rest will actually keep you on this lifestyle a lot longer. Giving yourself a day every month to not constantly worry about if you're being the perfect environmentalist is really, really helpful for you not constantly feeling like you have to be perfect. I get asked so often about eco-anxiety, and honestly, my answer to that always is take more of a break. Take yourself out of all the habits we just talked about, right? Give yourself a break from being super present and conscious and questioning everything, because it gets exhausting, I know. And if on those couple days a month you create more waste than you normally do, or you take a drive to clear your mind, or whatever it is that you do it guilt-free, because if those 2 days a month keep you on the trajectory to a real sustainable future with your actions and your purchases and you're advocating, then we will make a much bigger change than if we just constantly do all of the things and burn ourselves out and give up altogether. So I give you full permission this weekend to give yourself a break. And whenever anybody criticizes you, tell them it came straight from me. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it. Let me know what we think about the garland. I'll probably take it down. Let me know if you'll adopt any of these things, if this was actually helpful, if you're trying to start new habits. I'm a little bit nervous about this video because it was a little bit different for me. But let me know in the comments, and remember, until next time, you cannot do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good that you can do. Bye, guys.